welcome back to Bookish Theories. In today's video, we'd like to talk about Tomorrow by Together's Sugar Rush Ride, focusing on a little breakdown of the lyrics and the music video to see what they can tell us about the concept and story of this comeback. Now, Sugar Rush Ride is a song that portrays the story of a boy falling into the temptation of a sweet but deadly devil. If back in Blue Hour, the members asked if you can feel the rush, in this brand new comeback I bet that you all can, because this time around, the Sugar Rush is a ride that is meant to captivate you and draw you closer to a tempting dream. According to the press release, this is a sexy and refreshing song where Tomorrow by Together kinda play a double role. On the one hand, they are the ones being tempted. They are the ones who fall victims of a devil by the window that lures them into an endless fantasy which distracts them from their goals. On the other, however, they also become the tempters because in turn they tempt Moa with a sugar rush that is sweet and dangerous at the same time. Now in both the lyrics and the music video, this idea is expressed with a dreamy concept that brings us right back to Magic Island, which this time around becomes a Neverland where the boys are tempted by the prospect of eternal youth. As to been explained, the album as a whole revolves around the concept of young people facing temptation. They wish to become adults and achieve their dreams, but at the same time they're also tempted by the happiness and freedom of youth, which in turn is a sweet rush that is very difficult to resist. In order to continue down their path of growth, the boys have to learn to control their urges and resist temptation, but today we're not about that, because the song portrays the moment they actually fall for it. You see, since the name chapter Temptation is a concept album, all the tracks are connected to each other in order to tell a story, and as we saw back in the trailer, this story is heavily inspired by Peter Pan. Back in that video, the boys play the role of Wendy and the darling children, and the devil tempting them was embodied by Peter himself, who came through the window and was able to lure them into his Neverland with the promise of teaching them to fly. In the same way, this album begins with Tomorrow by Together being seduced by a devil by the window, which is none other than the Odette cat in disguise. That is the same creature that has been tormenting them since the very beginning, and this time around it invites them to dream on by luring them away from the reality of adulthood. In the opening song, the boys initially try to fight this temptation, but by the end of the track they eventually give in and fly away following this devil in disguise. Like the darlings follow Peter to Neverland, the boys are tempted by a dream of youth that leads them right back to their own Magic Island. In Sugar Rush Ride we follow this daydream, and the beautiful locations that we see recall both the setting of Peter Pan as well as the magical settings of the Star Seekers. Shot in Bali, the environment looks like a real-life Neverland. We can see locations recalling the Hangman's Tree, which is the hideout of Peter and the Lost Boys. Then we can see a setting that looks like Mermaid Lagoon, and in the distance we can also spot the misty mountains reigning over the island. The beautiful tree that we see when the boys are experiencing the sugar rush, however, seems to be a direct callback to Yggdrasil, which is the tree of life from Norse mythology that also plays a huge role in the storyline of the Star Seekers. This is a tree that was also referenced in videos like Magic Island, The Doom's Night, Blue Hour, Frost, and now it's making yet another appearance to show that even if Sugar Rush Ride doesn't strictly belong to the Star Seekers, it does have a lot of elements in common with it. At the beginning, for instance, the video opens with the boys waking up on the beach. As the camera follows a raindrop landing on Yeonjun's face, in the water we can actually spot the remains of a train called Promise with the numbers 304 written on the carriage. Right off the bat, this is very interesting because all of these elements are very important in Tomorrow by Together's lore. For one, 304 refers to their debut date, but back in Eternally we also saw that in the storyline the same date corresponds to a star festival that happened in the past. In turn, the word promise is just as important. Ever since the beginning, both the songs and the story hinted at a promise that the boys made with the star, but in Can't You See Me we saw that this promise was eventually forgotten as their memories turned into ash. As we see in a second, the devil of the story might have something to do with this event, but before we get to that, we also need to point out that promise is a word that has been connected to Yeonjun since pre-debut. In his questioning film, the Morse code at the end spelled the word promise, and on his photocard of the Dream Chapter star, his clue talked about a promise that is important for all of them. On the card, the message said that the promise is not just any promise, but rather a dream that all of them share. In Sugar Rush Ride, we see them falling back into this dream, and as we saw time and time again, they got to their destination using a train, which is what they usually use to get to Magic Island. Now, even if in the opening track they accepted the devil's invitation, when the boys initially wake up on the island, their temptation has just begun. As the members slowly get used to their surroundings, they're still wearing all of their clothes, and we don't see any fairy dust on their skin. Soon enough, however, the temptation of youth becomes too difficult to resist, and the first one who surrenders to it is Yeonjun, who starts running around and grabs Taeyeon's hand to make him join his game. This moment marks the true beginning of their adventure, because in the next scene, we see the members turning into the Lost Boys as they roam around their beautiful Neverland. At this point, we get the sense that some time has passed because some of their shirts have disappeared, and those that stayed are hanging on for dear life. We see them more disheveled, they're wearing vines, and now they have glitter over their ears and necks. They're basically covered in fairy dust, which in the original story is what gives the darlings the ability to fly. Like it was anticipated in the concept photos, this is the daydream stage of the temptation, so it's the moment they play around like happy fools. As they return to the land of their youth, the devil initially delivers on what he promised, and the boys get intoxicated by the sugar rush that overcomes them. Now, as we'll see in a second, this bliss is only temporary, because soon enough this daydream will turn into a nightmare. The devil that seduced them is a liar. The more the boys stay, and the more it wants, but at the beginning the boys don't understand it yet, because the liar lured them into a fantasy that makes them see the stars both literally and metaphorically. In order to express the devil's whispers, the song also borrowed some lyrics from the pansori called chunyanga. In Korea, pansori is a traditional style of musical storytelling where the singer tells an epic story in form of song. Among the 5 surviving works, chunyanga is possibly the most well-known by the general public, and in Sugar Rush Ride they referenced it while also adding traditional elements in the choreography. These folk elements help bring into life the story of temptation that the members are telling in their song, and as we see in the video, this temptation grows stronger and stronger as time goes by. The members get trapped in a daze that makes them addicted to the sweetness, and each of them experience temptation in a completely different way. As they run in the field and Yeonjun loses what's left of his shirt, for instance, we see the Hyunin Kai spots a little gecko on a rock. As he touches it, the animal turns purple, and the next thing you know is overcome by temptation at the root of a big tree. The same thing also happens to the others, but in each case they not only interact with different elements of the island, but they also have different experiences connected to their interactions. In Subin's case, for instance, his fall into temptation is portrayed as a literal dive into the water. When they're still on the beach, Subin is already reaching out for the waves, and when they run in the field, he stops in his tracks to look at a puddle hidden in the grass. As the temptation grows, his thirst for water grows as well. Wanting more and more, he then finds a bigger body of water and walks in it to reach a waterfall. Then he lays in it as he experiences the high of the sugar rush, and at the end he sinks into it as he's basically swallowed up by temptation. Like with Hyunin Kai, Subin's sugar rush ride is also triggered by an interesting encounter. While he walks in the forest, his attention is caught by something on a tree, and when he reaches out to it, we see a praying mantis next to a wet white flower. In the same way, Yeonjun's temptation blooms when he comes into contact with similar elements. In his case, his seduction begins when he's resting with the others. He turns around and notices a caterpillar crawling on a bush full of pink flowers. When he gets closer, Yeonjun picks one of the flowers, and as he does so, the sweetness of the nectar triggers the beginning of his sugar rush. In Taeyeon's case instead, the high of the sweetness is associated to air and wind, so much so that his experience with temptation literally sweeps him off his feet. If Subin drowned in temptation, Taeyeon takes off. His taste makes him levitate, and at the peak of his sugar rush, he falls into a fantasy full of feathers that defy gravity. Now, Taeyeon's feather vision here is also connected to the animal that he is associated with, which in this case is a bird that looks like an eagle. In turn, Bongyo's animal is the butterfly, which is a creature that is often associated to the land of their dreams. Back in We Lost the Summer, for instance, the boys regretted the loss of the summer of their life, and as they wished for it to come back, a butterfly descended from the sky and eventually landed on Bongyo's cheek. Both Napova Star and Frost showed us the butterflies on Magic Island, and in the Temptation teaser we saw that a butterfly anticipated the arrival of the devil, just like Tinkerbell came right before Peter Pan. In Sugar Rush Ride, the butterflies literally show their true colors, because it's with them and Bongyo that we cannot see the daydream turning into a nightmare. Like with the others and their animals, the butterflies initially lure Bongyo in. They enchant him and put him in a daze that makes him experience his sugar rush, but soon enough the high of his ride takes on a completely different turn. Even if at first he likes it, soon enough the butterflies become very aggressive, so much so that Bongyo runs away from them and takes refuge in a cave. Now if you go back to the MV and pay attention to the background noises, you will notice that when the boys are daydreaming, you can actually hear a tinkling of bells. In Peter Pan, that is the language of the fairies, so adding those sounds is meant to highlight the magical experience that they're going through. When Bongyo runs away, however, the tinkling of bells actually turns into a ringing sound that deafens him, and sure enough, that is none other than a tinnitus. As they tell us in that song, the tinnitus is a sound that they hear the moment they realize that their dream is a lie. It's a sound that disturbs them, that wakes them up to the realization that they're trapped like a fish in a bowl, and the same thing also happens to Bongyo and the others in the video. The sweet dream that gives them a sugar rush becomes a trippy nightmare like the one that we saw in the concept with the same name, and this drastic change eventually leads the boys to understand the reality of their situation. Even if getting lost in a dream felt good for a while, losing yourself in an illusion can become a nightmare that won't allow you to escape. Realizing this truth allows them to snap out of it and calm down from the rush of temptation, so by the end they say farewell to their Neverland and decide to go back to reality in order to become adults. Now in Sugar Rush Ride, this is a decision that they take in the middle of the song, because as the devil whispers to them, Huninkai suddenly screams to get away. In the bridge, the boys understand that their tempter is a bad liar, and even if to an extent that they are bad themselves for falling into temptation, these good boys gone bad are finally ready to see the truth. Now speaking of seeing things, Sugar Rush Ride is also surprisingly connected to Can't You See Me, so much so that the lyrics reference each other in a very interesting way. Back in the dream chapter Eternity, the concept explored the end of a friendship that was meant to last forever. As the boys in the story forgot the promise that they made, they let resentment blind them to the point that they could no longer understand each other or even see each other for the people that they were. Trying to figure out who was to blame, the boys asked who is the liar, and in Sugar Rush Ride we finally get an answer. You see, in this context, the liar is and always was the devil. It's the Odette cat tormenting them, the little voice that keeps calling them, and the very entity that has been trying to destroy them since day one. If in temptation the Odette devil lured them into a fake dream to distract them from reality, back in Eternity was the one trying to separate them. If you go back to the Eternity trailer, for instance, the members slowly drift apart to the point that Subin becomes invisible to them. They literally cannot see him anymore, and in the video we see that the culprit is none other than the Odette cat scheming in the darkness. Knowing what we know now, that is basically their devil playing his tricks. It wants to separate them, break their bond, make them forget their promise, and essentially trap them in a fantasy where they can leave their tomorrow behind. This is because in the story, the goal of the boys is to save the tomorrow that they want to build together, but the enemy doesn't want them to, which is why he constantly tries to stop them. In his last attempt, the devil by the window creates a perfect fantasy to keep them at bay. Since it's very similar to the dream they used to share, the boys are initially seduced by it, but soon enough they realize that their dream is a nightmare in disguise. If we take a look at Farewell Neverland, for instance, the lyrics tell us that their paradise is full of lies, and this is because this paradise is based on a broken promise. We can even go as far as to say that they are walking through a valley of lies, and by the end of the video and the album, they finally understand it. If in Sugar Rush Ride the devil makes them see the stars, in Farewell Neverland we discover that the stars are still sleeping, and this is the very same thing that they told us back in Magic Island. Even if the devil created a lie that the boys wanted to believe, the truth of the matter is that nobody can see the stars because they will keep on sleeping until they call them. In order to do that, however, they first need to remember the name, which actually connects us right back to the bigger concept of the name chapter. As I already explained in my previous videos, in Tomorrow by Together's lore, the concept of true names is an essential aspect of their storyline. In the Star Seekers, the true name defines the essence of their soul. It allows them to unlock their true powers, to know their true destiny, so knowing the name essentially means knowing themselves. Bear in mind, even if in Nap of a Star the boys make a promise with a single star representing Moa, in the star song that they have to remember, they were stars as well. Because of that, we can say that in their journey of growth, the Star Seekers are ultimately seeking themselves. They have to realize their potential, learn to know themselves, fulfill their destiny, and in order to accomplish this task and save the world in the process, they have to say goodbye to their Neverland in order to go back on track. By the end of the video, the boys leave that paradise full of lies, and even if this farewell is bittersweet, they do understand that it's for the best. Just like Wendy eventually chooses to leave Neverland and become an adult, the same goes for the boys in the story, and to a certain extent, we can even say that confronting temptation was a necessary step for them to grow. To understand the difference between their dream and the devil's lie, they had to see it for themselves, and as it turns out, what they see also answers their pre-debut question in films. Back in those videos, they asked, "What do you see?" and each of the members was associated to different animals which also appear in Sugar Rush Ride. Subin as the praying mantis, Yeonjun sees the pink flowers and the caterpillar, Bongyu as the butterflies, Taeyeon as a bird, and Huninkai as a gecko. Back in the questioning films, those animals were also associated to Morse codes connected to their true names, and this implies that what they saw during their temptation is very much a part of their journey to discover their true names and therefore themselves. In order to see where this journey will lead them, we'll have to wait and see, but Taeyeon already said that this comeback already spoiled the next. If you want me to make a video about that, let me know in the comments down below. But in the meantime, I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and if you did, please think about liking and subscribing. As always, thank you so much for watching, guys. I'll see you next time. Bye bye.